with demand expected to come back, the question remains, does this mean the economy is back on track?
Companies now, after experimenting with offshore in places like India, Philippines, and Poland, want to bring those jobs back.
We invest in the U.S. We're the biggest exporter in the country. In the cycle we're in right now, we're creating jobs.
From Radio America, it's Neil Asbury's Made in America, the show that explores American industry, large and small, and promotes American-made products everywhere. Put Neil Asbury's Made in America to work for you.
A very big welcome to you today. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffin. Hey, Rich, man, we got a rockin' show today. It's going to be really, really fun. It's going to go by really fast. We're going to talk about a lot of very important topics. You know, the crazies just keep getting crazier. And it's amazing. I mean, the new Green Deal. I mean, Rich, what is going on with that? I mean, could a bill be emerging out of Congress that this thing might be for real?
Well, can you imagine that? I mean, you don't even have to imagine. Just watch, television tonight. That the Democrats took over the House, and within about a nanosecond, they started, contemplating raising taxes, taking money out of your pocket, eliminating fossil fuels. More investigations against the president, giving a pass to. Oh, that's right, that happened today. Cory Booker for violating ethics rules in the committee from. The Kavanaugh investigation, so to speak. I use that word on purpose. It is amazing. So is it far-fetched for me to think that they're going to go ahead and try and take AOC's concept, which she didn't write because she doesn't know how to write that way, into a bill? No, it doesn't surprise me at all. But it does bother me and does upset me that it's just, further wealth distribution, which is the mark of Obama.
Well, in the whole Democrat Party, which is basically the socialist party of America. I mean, I don't know if there's any. You just can't distinguish it from the party of just 5 years ago. I mean, it has gone so far to the left. I mean, you got a guy like Howard Schultz. I'm not necessarily his fan or anything, but I mean, a very successful man says he's thinking about running for president. The Democrats just go ballistic on the guy. You got the socialist wing of the Democrat Party saying he should first run for city council or something. Like, the guy's a knucklehead and he's got too much to learn to be in politics. Here's a very, very successful guy. He's done an incredible thing with the company that he founded, or at least grew to what it is today, Starbucks. And success seems to be a disqualifying factor to be in the Democrat Party today. I mean, look at Michael Bloomberg. I mean, he's never, ever going to have a chance for this nomination.
Well, what really concerns me is that the concept of the American dream has been turned upside down. I mean, it upsets me dramatically. Why am I not surprised? When I was a kid in college and I had to read 1984 and I had to read Brave New World and in other stories like that, where you have these apocalyptic concepts of language. And the language we're hearing today is newspeak. And the newspeak is saying what's good is bad and bad is good. So we live in a very dangerous, scary time, and we better get control of this.
Well, let's bring on our first guest, and he watches and tracks this. We really got to get his thoughts. He's been with us many times before. We love the guy. He does wonderful work at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Very pleased to have back with us Wayne Cruse. Hey, Wayne, thanks for coming back to be with us.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
So talk a little bit about, to start off here, with the new Green Deal and what's happening with the Socialist Party in America today.
Well, I'm surprised. It was interesting to hear you guys open up the show. I'm surprised that, I guess we shouldn't be surprised that the Democratic Party has moved left, but that is the trend. And there is a belief that, you can switch the economy rapidly to renewable energies, and that's really what underlies this, along with the social programs, too. Because remember, the Green New Deal that you all were opening the show about, I call it the Green New Steel, because it amounts to a huge transfer of power and resources from the public, from individuals to the federal government, which I think is wrong. But it's not just a big energy platform, which is misguided on its face, because you can't convert rapidly from fossil fuels to wind energy and solar you've always got to have backup energy, and that backup energy not typically, it's always a fossil fuel energy. If you're trying to live off the grid, you better have your propane backup. That's all I have to say. And there are a lot of misconceptions too, because an electric car like a Tesla is not an electric car, it's a coal-powered car. So there's a big element of fantasy involved in it. And remember, too, that the Green New Deal doesn't involve just energy issues. It's also social issues like Medicare for all, and it's got much kinship with the programs for financial reform and for free college education and so forth. That's one of the problems that we have with talking about regulatory costs, which is what you have me on talking about. The reason we can't see eye to eye and debate Democrats on stuff anymore is because they don't see there's being any such thing as a regulatory cost. To them, if government runs a sector like energy, like healthcare, like financial services, that's not a cost. That's a good thing. That's a benefit. So we have a real clash of philosophies there.
Well, Wayne, what I find interesting is that when I listen to I watch some of the video taken downtown in different cities on Fox, for example, and they ask the folks, well, listen, what do you think about, this universal college education? What do you think about universal income? What do you think about Medicare for all? And they say, oh, my God, that's great. And then you say, well, how are we going to pay for it? And they think for a second and they go, I don't know, I guess taxes? I mean, is this, Scandinavian or Swedish syndrome for those who've been hostages so long?
Well, there was a lot of interest there's a lot of interest in raising taxes because, of course, the left never could stand the Trump tax reform program. And they talk about raising taxes on the top earners to pay for these programs, but I think these programs are so gargantuan it might run them for a few days, and then you run out of cash. So, and at the same time, they talk about giving the middle class a tax break. I think we really all have to step back. Y'all talked about the change in the Democratic mindset. I think that's true. And Howard Schultz and his being attacked is a sample of that. I remember I worked in the Senate back in the 90s, and I remember at that time I was with Senator Phil Gramm, and the debate was over the Hillary healthcare reform, and we got the Obamacare reform since then. But I remember Democrats changing parties, like Richard Shelby was a Democrat and switched over to Republican, and there was a much different mindset among Democrats than what you see today. You've got the younger group of them that are extremely radical, and they vote that way too, and their constituency supports that. A lot of the older Democrats who are in power, I have a feeling they're not quite sure what to do with all of this, because while the Green New Deal is getting a lot of attention, some of the Democrats who've been around a long time know that that's an economic calamity, and it's their problem how they're going to deal with that in the party. I think in a lot of ways the Republicans are just sitting back and saying, pass the popcorn.
Yeah, well, this could be the greatest gift for Republicans because, that's not where Main Street America is. Remember when Obama got elected, they went after cap and trade, right? Cap and trade. We did a lot of shows, Wayne. We had you back on back then, and they were going to pass cap and trade. I mean, it was so unpopular in middle America that it went nowhere, and it alienated a huge amount of the Democrat vote. I mean, the wave, what was it, 70 seats in 2010 changed hands just in the House because of things like cap and trade. This is not a winning proposition, Wayne.
Right, good point. That's a good point, too, because a lot of remember, they tried to do cap and trade through legislation. And the Obama administration decided to do Clean Power Plan and other energy efficiency programs and so forth through the regulatory process. And in a way, the growth of the administrative state has enabled what we have now. I mean, in other words, you couldn't have the Green New Deal if you didn't already have the New Deal. And the New Deal relied on a lot of centralization and administrative state groundwork that had been laid in the 19th century up until that time. Sometimes I call the antitrust laws like the original sin of the administrative state and the regulatory state. And now we even have President Trump agreeing with Democrats that we need to go after social media and go after regulation there. Now, there are a lot of issues involved in that. There are a lot of cultural debate issues involved in the social media and the growth of those. But I think the idea of the federal regulators stepping in and setting the terms of what we talk about is a bad move.
Wayne, can you hold that thought? Do you have a moment to come back to this? Because I really want to follow up on this.
Yeah,
I do too. Because I want to follow up because I see things a little bit differently. But do you have a moment to come back?
That's what I thought. And that's why. And when we come back to it, that's what I think you got to be careful about. Because when you get Donald Trump and say Mark Warner in the Senate agreeing that we regulate content, you might run into some unexpected problems.
Let's hold that thought. Hey, folks, you don't want to miss this. I mean, Wayne Cruse is going to be right back. We're going to continue with this discussion. It's so fundamentally important to our country, to our jobs. We got to stay around. You want to stick with us. Wayne Cruse, Competitive Enterprise Institute, coming right back.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffin, and we have with us Wayne Cruse from the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Hey, Wayne, so you really hit a nerve there, and I just don't know. Look, Google, all of these people, Google, Amazon. I mean, they become very, very big political operators, and
right.
They are moving this country left in the way that they do it, and they can do it behind the scenes. Now, Amazon, of course, no, not Amazon. I mean, it's a great organization that sells things, but its owner is the owner of the Washington Post. I mean, an amazing political advocacy operation that he has going on. And of course, Google, and, we know what their political stripes are. Don't they have incredible power? And haven't they gotten so big that that power can be used in a way that it's not intended to?
They do have a lot of power, and in fact, they have even more power that you didn't mention. The internet tax, as a matter of fact, was upheld by the Supreme Court, and Donald Trump never criticized the internet tax. In fact, he seemed to think of it as something that was going to hurt Amazon, but actually Amazon was the big lobbyist for it because they have the Associates program and so forth, and they could say, hey, we've got most of the online traffic as far as sales go, so we'll just collect that tax for you. So the internet tax, I agree, that's something that ended up benefiting them a lot. I've seen the kind of dispute you're talking about, Trump calling the Washington Post the Bezos Post because of Jeff Bezos and so forth. Always remember, guys, and we've talked about this before, and we're not going to resolve it here, but every company in a free society doesn't act just on its own. It's got upstream suppliers, downstream business customers, ordinary consumers, the media, Wall Street, advertisers. All these forces are arrayed against companies that misbehave. I was watching a movie the other day on Netflix with my wife. I think it was called 8th Grade, and the dad said something to the kid in the car. Hey, can you send so-and-so a message on Facebook? And the kid says, nobody uses Facebook anymore. So a lot of these things are transitory. I think there's no question that they do have market power. And then what you're saying too is that they also have political power. I get where you're coming from. I'm smelling what you're stepping in, but keep in mind that the big companies of the past, like MySpace, or there was a time when the biggest search engine was Alta Vista. Those things change, and the more companies tick people off, the more people turn away from them. But just related to this, what I think is important to keep in mind is in this administration, we've had some of the best success we've had in terms of rolling back regulations that we've seen in, you could almost say ever, because the numbers of rules and regulations that came out in the past 2 years are less than they have been since records started being kept in the 70s.
But when you talk about that, all this big rollback, and it was in your piece actually, that what is it? The regulatory state here is about $1.5 trillion a year it costs our economy. I've seen all kinds of numbers. roughly 10% of our economy. And you said in 2018, the rollback was about 20 billion, a paltry 20 billion out of 1.5 trillion. We really haven't cut much, have we?
Right. The way I would look at it is this. That's exactly right. And I say this in the piece, and I talked about it in I do a report every year called 10,000 Commandments, Surveying Regulations, and I'm talking about that now. Here's the problem we have. You got over 3,000 rules and regulations that come out every year. Meanwhile, Congress is only passing a few dozen laws. So when we talked about the administrative state earlier in the driver's seat, it really is. It's making most of the law. So when the agencies put out their cost-benefit analyses, turns out they only do cost-benefit analysis for less than 24 rules a year. Meanwhile, there are 3,000 rules and regulations. So when the Trump administration has said we've cut these rules, that we've met our 2-for-1 goals, for example, a big problem with that, guys, is that so few rules are tabulated or quantified in the first place that it's difficult to even get a grasp on what's really going on. So within that constraint, they've been able to say, yeah, they've cut those handful of billions of dollars, and it's not very much. I agree. That was why I mentioned in the 10,000 Commandments report that it's not just the rules and regulations that are going into play, but it's also the categories of regulation that the administrations engage in, and sometimes you can roll things back even without reducing rules. And I think that happened with the Trump change in mindset on energy regulation, as we were talking about earlier, and in other areas too. He put out executive orders and guidances and notices with respect to infrastructure, for example. And so businesses, and he got on TV several times with that big stack of government rules and regulations and a piece of red tape in front of it, stretched across the stage. But by liberalizing infrastructure permitting, for example, that alone has a huge effect on increasing economic activity. So we've got our problem of rolling all of this regulation back is it's much more than what Trump is being able to do just as a president. But that's,
Wayne, we're going to have to leave it there. A great segment, the regulatory state, what's going on there, what's going on with these people like Facebook and Google and Yahoo and so on. Very, very important topics for our country. Thanks for coming on, Wayne Cruse from the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Coming up, you don't want to miss this one. We got Cameron Cruse, who's the co-CEO of our Riveter, and they provide military spouses mobile income. You'll be fascinated to see how they did this.
Made in America.
Sharply higher at the open, stocks continued to perform well over the course of the day Tuesday.
And I think that bodes well here over the next couple of years for having bigger demands coming to this country.
Now, more of Neal Asbury's Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffman. Hey, Rich, before the show ends today, I got to get you into the discussion about the economic impact of these big social media giants like Facebook and Google and Yahoo on the economy. Are they getting too big? Should they be broken up? I mean, what sort of power do they have? Are they using it wisely? Are they misusing it? I mean, a huge amount of topics to go there. And we're anti-regulation, but I don't know if this one here has gotten to the point to where they should be regulated. But we're going to get into that here just in a moment. But before we do, I really love, when we do stories about that impact our people, the great men and women in our armed forces. And we don't think about it, but, they move around so much. It's not like, the kids grow up in one location, they start in kindergarten, they graduate high school, and, they're in the same home, same town, and, it's a wonderful environment. However, imagine if you move every 2 years or 2.5 years. What do you do to sort of make money? How do you establish a career? How do you get that income to do those extra things in life that you want to do? I mean, we don't think about that often, but it's a really big issue. Our guest coming on now has come up with a plan, and it's working, and it's amazing. And you just got to hear this story. Coming with us right now is Cameron Cruse. She is the co-CEO and founder of Riveter, and they provide military spouses a way to make income as they move around to the various destinations that they serve in. Cameron, welcome to Made in America.
Well, thank you for having us. I'm excited to be here.
Well, this is absolutely excellent. And so, well, tell us about your company and what you do. I think let's start there. It's just such an amazing story.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, military spouses and their families, they're moving every 2 to 3 years on average. So what we found is that it was incredibly difficult for them to find a job and keep a job. And my business partner, when we met, we realized that we were going to go through this transition so much. And it wasn't just ourselves that we needed to start this business for, but our entire community. So basically, military spouses get to take their job with them, where they make parts and pieces of our handbags, and they ship them back to us in North Carolina, where we put everything together. But that is how we are kind of doing our part to provide mobile, flexible income to our military spouse community.
Well, I think that's a terrific thing to do. We've talked about the folks who serve in the armed forces and the commitment that they have, and what great opportunities the government, our country has for those who have been in the military to come out and find a job, and also for those in the family who are moving all the time. I have a cousin who's a graduate of West Point, graduated in the top 10, wound up over in the Mideast, and this is going back about 20 some odd years. And he's been all over the world. About every third or fourth year, he's moving, whether it's the United States or he's going back to Afghanistan, or he's going to go back to, he goes to Japan. Wherever there's a huge military base, he winds up and he runs. He's a colonel at this point. But the families need to have an opportunity to engage in the economy and where they live. And what you're saying is very correct. I mean, how do you do that? And why would somebody hire you if, in fact, they know you're going to be pulled up and moved someplace else? You're very nomadic. So this gives them an opportunity to be a nomad, but make money being a nomad.
Exactly. Yeah, military spouses and their families, they experience a life of transition for the entirety of the career. So when Lisa and I were looking at this problem, we thought, there's no better population of individuals like military spouses that deserve an income opportunity. And I think that the biggest, piece there is that there's so many charities and people that want to give, but military spouses at the end of the day aren't looking for charity, they're looking for income opportunity.
So where are your products sold?
We sell everything online, so it's ourriveter.com, like Rosie the Riveter. And we also have just recently opened up a flagship store here in Southern Pines, North Carolina, just outside of Fort Bragg. And so we took on the world of e-commerce and brick and mortar, and we're seeing success. And I think that it's, we took on two of the industries, brick and mortar and manufacturing. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. But I think it's been an incredible adventure.
Did I read this correctly that you produce about 20,000 bags a year?
We did. So last year we produced about 21,000 accessories and handbags.
Rich, I mean, that's incredible. I mean, absolutely fascinating.
Well, I mean, it's Prada.
Well, it's proudly made not only in the USA, but by military spouses. And, wow, I'm going to go online. I'm going to buy it.
Listen, I think anybody who has
for birthday gifts and holiday gifts.
Neil, you're 100% correct. Anybody who has the opportunity to support the folks who are in the military and their families who are traveling along with them, and obviously helping the United States as well. And they deserve every bit of attention that we can give them to be successful in what they want to do. So I think if there's an opportunity to work with this company, with our Riveter, and say, listen, they've got products that I think I want. Why not buy it from them and give them the opportunity to let people, have their share of the American dream?
And the story that goes behind with the product is absolutely amazing. And Cameron, I read that you actually got your start on Shark Tank, and it was Mark Cuban who made an initial investment in your business. Tell us about that.
We did. Well, we started the company in 2011, and we went on Shark Tank in 2016. So we had just a little bit of time before the Shark Tank slingshot. But Mark Cuban did invest, and he's still a 20% equity partner. He invested about $100,000 in our business, which, obviously we put it all right back in to provide more mobile income opportunities to military spouses. But, Shark Tank was an incredible platform to be able to tell our story and grow the business. And it was terrifying, especially from two women who had never, had a real job before in their life, to go in front of those 5 individuals and try to pitch and pretend like we knew what we were talking about was absolutely terrifying. But it was a great story and a great outcome.
So okay, unfortunately we're going to be out of time, but hey, I love you and what you're doing and the entrepreneurial experience that you have. I mean, it is so essentially American and, just great stuff. Cameron Cruse, co-CEO and founder of Riveter, and they're providing our military spouses a way to make income as they move around to their various postings as they serve our country. A wonderful, wonderful story. Cameron, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Coming up, we have Johnny Kampis, who is an investigative reporter at the Taxpayers Protection Alliance Foundation. And we're going to talk about this, believe it or not, a $33 minimum wage in New York. That's right, $33 minimum wage. You don't want to miss this.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffman. Hey, Rich, it's really, really wonderful to do radio, especially when you get to meet people like Cameron Cruse and what she's doing at Riveter and providing jobs to our military spouses and the way she did it and her products and so forth and the success she's having. Absolutely heartwarming. But, this whole minimum wage discussion has morphed into, it really doesn't matter what value you add. We're just going to set wages at a number that has no sort of relevance to what you do, but we're just going to set them up to a price because politically, we want your votes. And if we do that, we're going to get elected. And, so what if, all the jobs go away, that'll be somebody else's problem. It's amazing how America has been sucked into this minimum wage thing. And now you're seeing in New York City, in places like Seattle, that $15, I mean, that's like so old fashioned. $15, who in the world works for $15? We need 20, we need 30, we need 40. Where is it going to stop? I don't know. I just don't know. Well, let's bring on Johnny Kampis, who's a investigative reporter for Taxpayers Protection Alliance Foundation, and he's just published a piece in the American Spectator. Johnny, so
yes,
where is this thing going to stop, and what is the right minimum wage, and should there even be a minimum wage?
Well, I think I would argue, and Taxpayers Protection Alliance and other groups, like-minded groups, would argue that there shouldn't be a minimum wage. It should be what the market sets. So, that you provide the value, you get the wage. And I understand the arguments that people need a livable wage, but, better yourself, find a better job. I mean, don't settle. And that's how you improve your standing in life.
Well, what concerns me with this whole thing, and I agree exactly with what you're saying, I don't think you should advocate a minimum wage. It should be, not $1 more or $1 less, exactly what the market will bear, which actually in some cases, could actually be more than what we're talking about, if in fact that provides tremendous value to the corporation and to the products and services that they sell. But the thing that seems weird to me is that and you heard this a lot with people, like at McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's, you can't make a living wage there to support a family. Well, we all knew that it was never supposed to support a family. It was an entree-level job. It's the type of job that you would have as a kid growing up to learn about the capitalist system and the workplace. And that lower wage, but the knowledge of working there, learning about business and the real world was worth an awful lot to you later, as Neal pointed out, when you go out and try and find a better job.
Yeah, absolutely. I recall, when I was a teenager I didn't work fast food. I worked at Kmart, entry level job. I think I made $5.50 an hour back when minimum wage was about $5.25. And it's something I did while I was going to junior college. And then in college, I worked some other jobs that didn't pay a whole lot. I got my degree and, moved on from there. And I understand not everybody's going to go to college but there's ways to get the training you need to do the jobs that will pay you more. You don't have to go to college. Obviously college, you get a better job, probably get a better pay, but, you can do better than $7.25 an hour. You can get a job like $15 an hour if you get the skills that you need. There's people out there that need good workers.
But, in the country, we live in a beautiful, vast country, and, economic conditions are different. Imagine if you tried to enforce $15 an hour in some of our rural communities. There wouldn't be any jobs there at all. And yet $15 in some other places may not be enough, right? So let the market decide. And instead of having some politicians just trying to get votes and potentially destroying jobs instead of creating jobs that they're supposed to be trying to protect the worker, and yet the jobs are going away. So, $33 an hour, but if you don't have a job, folks, you're not making $33 an hour, you're making zero.
Yeah, that leads into a point that I've made about this the effort in the House by the Democrats for $15 an hour federally mandated wage, which, by the way, I've dubbed the Boost Automation and Shutter Small Businesses Act, because that's exactly what it would do, right? But the one-size-fits-all minimum wage, like in New York City, $15 an hour compared to rural Alabama where I live, they just can't afford $15 an hour here, and the cost of living is so much less. Why would you need $15 an hour everywhere in the country? It just seems preposterous to me.
Yeah, you want to see our jobs go to China? I don't care if you have 50% tariffs and duties on Chinese products. If you're at $15, $20 a minimum wage here in the United States, it doesn't matter how much we tariff the products. America is not going to be making anything. They're going to be making anything. And that's the reality. That's the reality. Look, the minimum wage, I'm sure there's very good intentions here, but the unintended consequences is people will be working for zero because they won't be having a job. Johnny, hey, thanks for being on our show. Johnny Kampis, who's an investigative reporter for the Taxpayers Protection Alliance Foundation. Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I are going to have some final thoughts for the day. I cannot believe we're already to that point.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neal Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Rich, another rip-roaring show. It was very, very fascinating. I had a great time today. But I know you wanted to get on this discussion about the social media giants. Should they be broken up? Is there antitrust issues here? Are they providing a good, or are they crossing the line? A very, very difficult topic. What say you?
Well, first of all, you have to define what they are now. If in fact we look at them as a major communication vehicle, the way we did Bell, the Ma Bell scenarios and all the baby bells years ago, then you may have to look at it and say, well, maybe we do need some regulation. I'll tell you what concerns me with this, and I think you're very correct. There is such political power in social media because a good plurality of Americans receive their news not necessarily from NBC, ABC, CBS, and so forth. They actually get it from social media. So that concerns me because
and we hear, and it's out there all the time, especially around election time, where the social media giants are trying to influence political positions. So they're very actively engaged in owning these companies. It's like the Ma Bell, and if they try to cut communications from one political party to help the another political party. I mean, back in the 70s, in the 80s and the 90s, I mean, that would be totally unacceptable. I mean, we would not stand for that. So why would we stand for it now?
Well, you can't. But what concerns me is that when you Google something, let's say you Google stories about Trump, something about Trump, and you find out, where does the information come from? Well, it's coming from left-wing media. And it's going to come from the New York Times, going to come from the Washington Post, it's coming from Atlantic Monthly, it's going to come from all the left-wing progressive media that's out there, and it's going to sway public opinion. And that concerns me a lot.
Here's an example. I have an iPhone, right? And you know, you got the icon there for news.
Yep.
That's set up with your phone.
Yeah, exactly.
And you click on the news feed there, and it's all 90%. It's all left-wing media.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, everything is being programmed to fit their ideology, you know, and if you try to change it to something that's more, you know, kind of centrist and down the middle, it's so hard to do. You keep getting stuff in news feeds from people that you don't want, even if you try to block them. It's going on. It's going on. It's an ideology, and it's being promoted, you know, through these large media companies, communications companies. And, you know, I think it's a problem, especially since they have a monopoly on it, right? There's not like another choice or two choices to go to. You're kind of stuck with them.
Well, exactly.
And you're stuck with their ideology.
Exactly correct. And you're stuck with something else, Neal, and this is something that we need to look into, and maybe, you know, Phil could get somebody on the show in the next few weeks, and that's surveillance capitalism. We're involved in the world of surveillance capitalism. What does that mean? Well, look at Google, for example. Google is making billions of dollars surveilling those who are using Google. When you get Gmail, you get it for free, but you're not getting it for free because they're sucking out of you your soul of all your psychometrics, the thought patterns, the purchasing pattern, and more importantly, the thinking pattern. And with that, Neal, by surveilling you, they're making billions of dollars. So not only do they control where thoughts are going, you know, for an election, for example, but they also know how to manipulate those thoughts where they're going and how to make them buy product as they go forward or donate or whatever. I mean, think for a second, Big Brother. This is exactly the fear of 1984. I wasn't joking about that earlier in the show. We are involved right now with all of this.
But Rich, you know, we're anti-regulators, right? I mean, we don't like regulation. We fought very much under the Obama administration against regulation and over-regulating. We talked a lot about that. You know, are we being hypocritical to say that, well, you know, we don't like regulation on this part of the economy, but, you know, let's nail these social media guys? I mean, is that fair for us to do?
Well, what if there's nobody else to counter the truth? What if the truth is malleable? What if the truth is only what a handful of people want it to be, Neal? How do you discern and how do you find the truth if, in fact, there is no truth? It's just an opinion of what somebody's got, and that's the way it happens to be. So this is something we need to look into more and get some experts on to talk about, because this is big business and big scare.
Yeah, especially, you know, that combined with the Green New Deal. Hey, Rich. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
I know. Geez, we're just getting it going here, man.
Oh, my goodness. We're on a roll. But we're going to carry this forward next week when we have another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.